Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cinco de Mayo meeting for the Planning and Zoning Commission. It is,
This conference will now be recorded.
it is May 5th, 2020, and it's about 8 o'clock. We're doing the general meeting and public hearing tonight from room 119 in Town Hall and also on GoToMeeting. It's very fun because this is my favorite meeting of the year, Cinco de Mayo, and I usually chair it. I don't know why, even when I wasn't chairing. So Jen, you get to do it next. Tonight we have a public hearing. It's a continuation of a public hearing regarding a coastal site plan review, number 213C, land filling regrading application, number 186A, special permit application, number 311, 20 Juniper in Darien, Juniper LLC, 20 Juniper Road. Jim Rand is not on yet.
Kara Gately's here, Jennifer, George Riley, Larry Warble, and we're just missing Jim Rand.
Jim Rand's missing the meeting. Let me just send it to him. Bear with me, folks, 1 second. Hold on 1 second, Riley.
Oh, someone just popped on. I think it's him. Steve? There he is.
Jim Rand's here. Got it.
Sorry,
Okay.
I
No
Never
problem. We
mind.
just kind of sort of started. We have a quorum. We are still missing Kara Gately.
No, she's there, bottom
Where's-
right. Bottom right?
There she is.
I
Got
see
her.
Kara.
I see Kara. Yep, everybody's here. Perfect. Wilder Gleason, representing 20 Juniper LLC, is here. We're talking about, we have 3 open items, I think.
Correct.
One was the pillars.
One was the pillars, the other was the landscaping plan, the concerns of the neighbors about lighting of the court, and then the third issue was basically any conditions on the lighting approval, the hours, et cetera, things like that.
Okay. Go ahead. And-
Yes, this was a continuation of a public hearing. The commission has received supplemental materials from Attorney Wilder Gleason in a packet dated May 1, and the exhibits are noted in the top right corner, and both Fred and Channel 79 will be able to pull the exhibits up on the screen, and the exhibits you see are the ones that were put in your packet Friday, and they were also posted on the town website late last week. I think it was Thursday or Friday.
Okay, and based on some feedback from commissioners and discussion with Jeremy, after every expert that Mr. Gleason or the applicant's representative presents, we're going to do Q&A with the commissioners. And then after that expert's finished, or Q&A is finished, then we can move on to the next expert. Okay? Wilder Gleason, please take it away.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being safe, and thank you for allowing me to come. We're here tonight to deal with 3 issues. The first was relocation of the pillars and entry gate. The land trust had a concern about that. The second is to address the concerns of the neighbors about lighting of the pickleball court. And I had prepared an outline that was going to have our lighting expert first and then our landscaper. I'm going to reverse that order at the suggestion of Steve Olvany so that Douglas Clark, our landscaper, will go first, and then Gary Novacell, who was our lighting design expert, will go next. I did submit Gary's CV. It should be part of the record. He has an extensive track record, 37 years of doing lighting design, teaching at Parsons School and elsewhere, doing lighting for the botanical gardens and the like, interior and exterior. And then I guess it would be conditions of any lighting approval. So let me start first with the easiest piece, which is the exhibits that I submitted were, I put exhibit 1, 2, 3, 4 in the upper right-hand corner. And because of the change in experts order, we're going to go exhibits 1, 2, 3, then 7 and 8, and then 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. So let me write that down if everyone wants to know. It's 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10. So, starting with Exhibit 1, which is the drawing SK5. You'll see it in the upper right-hand corner of the drawing. This is prepared by Thompson Races, and if you look over by Juniper Road, where the terminus of Juniper Road is, it calls out the original proposed location of the pillars, and that's about 80 feet from the edge of Juniper Road, the edge of the Juniper Road right-of-way. And what has happened is, in order to provide access to the Darien Land Trust, we have now moved it back so it's 158.2 feet from Juniper Road. It's almost double the distance that it was before. And you can see in the upper left corner, there's two parallel dashed lines, slightly curved. Those are the access way that the Land Trust uses. And so the gates are in page 2 of this exhibit. Fred, if you want to flip that, that would be great. The gates, the pillars now are 5 feet tall, and the gate is slightly more than 4 feet tall. And it's fine. We'll just go to item 2. Item 2 is an email that we had received from John O'Brien, who was the co-president of the Darien Land Trust. He looked at the site, looked at the proposed location of the pillars, and he said, it's okay as far as the Land Trust is considered. This is great for our purposes. I highlighted that in yellow. So that first issue is resolved. We've pulled it back, and we're ready to go to the second issue.
Can I just confirm
Sure.
that? Jeremy and I went out to the property on Thursday or Friday, something like that.
Friday.
We met by accident, Mr. John O'Brien, and he just confirmed everything you said.
Great.
That's the guy we met, right?
That's
Yep.
correct.
Thank you.
All right, great. So now we turn to Exhibit 3, which is
Hold on. Now we're going to do Q&A because that's the next one.
Okay.
Does any commissioner have any questions with regards to that issue, which is Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2? Let's go Jennifer Leahy.
I have no questions.
Okay, Larry Warble. Larry? I can't see.
Sorry, I had to scroll. No questions.
Okay. Jim Rand?
I have no questions.
George Riley?
No.
Kara Gately?
Not really. It's a question. It's really more people. I think, Steve, I had mentioned this to you, and I was going to send a screenshot or something to the commission about a question I received via text from neighbors regarding the gates and pillars.
Yep.
And I think, for the record, I just want to state, that this exhibit, which is labeled Exhibit 1, page 2 of Exhibit 1, which is available on the Darien PNC website, shows a diagram of what the pillars and the gate will look like.
Yes?
Yeah. And page 1 of Exhibit 1 shows the pillars and the gate will be located. Yes?
Correct.
Correct. And just for clarity's sake, and I know probably everyone is a lot more knowledgeable and a lot more, savvy about reading plans than I am. Lawyers, we're kind of word people. We're not, we're notoriously bad at numbers and notoriously bad at sort of visual stuff. How high will the pillars be? And they look like they're going to be stone. And it looks like, if I can understand this correctly, the gates will be wood of some sort.
They're allowed
that
to,
correct?
I'm sorry, they're allowed to be 6 feet high. They're proposed to be 5 feet high, and the gates
Okay.
will be a little over 4 feet high, and I'm not sure what the materials will be. The pillars will be clad in stone.
Nice.
They will have a concrete base that's down, I think, set down 3 or 4 feet below ground, and actually several feet below ground, not 4. And beyond that, I can't speak. I know it'll be attractive. If you look at the house, you'll see it's an attractive house, and they're making other improvements to it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think this issue's all done.
So are we all done on this issue?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Let's turn to Exhibit 3, which is probably the most complicated one. If you've got it in your packages, it's the green Google Earth photograph that our architect's office, Scott Races, was able to have someone in his office superimpose contour lines from the GIS mapping. And then they were able to identify the location of our pickleball court, which you can see right in the center, where it's labeled, it's in green, has an X on it, and it says 19-foot elevation. So our pickleball court is at elevation 19. And then there are red lines drawn showing the distance from the pickleball court to neighbors' houses. And you'll see that Bob Fisk's house, which is to the southwest, he's our closest neighbor. He's 520 feet away from us. That's a long distance. And his first floor elevation is, the elevation outside of his house is about 15. So he's a little bit lower than the pickleball court. But he has already looked at our plans before we made the changes, and he said, I have no objections, go ahead. We also, in the intervening 2 weeks, we had discussions with Mr. Collins, who lives adjacent to the Fisk house and further to the west, and he has indicated no objection. He's over here on Juniper.
Thank you.
So, we have had no discussions with neighbors on the east side, but we did look at the property and realized that even though they're quite distant, there are some holes in the landscaping that we didn't realize were there. We thought the conservation easement up north and on the sides with the existing screening was sufficient. In this drawing, you can see that 86 Pear Tree Point Road, the number is in yellow, has an elevation of about 35, so it's a little bit above our court. Number 90, by the way, 86 is 800 feet away. 560 feet away from the pickleball court is number 90 Pear Tree Point Road, and that's at elevation 18 outside the house. And then as you come down south on Pear Tree Point Road, number 94 is in yellow, you can see it, and that's at elevation 18, just as number 90 is. Number 98 is at elevation 20, and number 106, which I think was one of the people last time who was concerned, it was 102?
It was 102, which
Okay.
is behind 106.
106 is in roughly the same area. He's at elevation 18. So basically we're at elevations 18, 20, 18, 18, and then 35. And the distances are 800 feet, 560 to number 90, and 640 to 106. So they're quite a bit further than the Fisk house, which is our closest residence. And you can see in looking at it, our site is right in the center, 7 acres, in the middle of what is essentially a rectangle of about 30 to 50 acres, depending on how you configure it. We're an island in the middle between houses on the west and houses on the east. And frankly, I couldn't think of a better place to have a lighted pickleball court in town unless you were in one of the country clubs with, 140 acres surrounding you. So,
I'm just not as knowledgeable as everybody else. You gave the locations of certain properties over on the other side of Pear Tree Point Road, but not all of them. Is that because of their elevation?
no, it was just, we were trying to identify, I had gone out after the last hearing and I figured out that 86 and 90 did have lines of sight into the pickleball court, so it was important that we get those. And I understood one of the concerned neighbors to be at 106, so we called that out. Apparently I was incorrect, and it's 102, which is
behind it.
nearby.
The only one that I would mention would be 94. That one's probably about 560 feet away too.
Right.
94 and 90 look about the same.
Yeah.
Just for ease of convenience, 90, that is Pear Point School?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
So that's the lower piece. The school building per se is way up high.
The school building is up higher, probably at elevation 35 or so, but that's the building at the entrance that was called
Yep.
out.
Yep.
And so,
There was a neighbor who called in and who I think spoke. Did we measure, just because they came and they spoke at the meeting? Which property is that?
They were 102, Kara. 102 is behind 106 on a private road. If you look on
Okay.
the map that he's showing, at the top of the 106 site, you see a white road
Yeah?
behind that's a private
That one in the
road.
middle that looks like behind 98?
No, I think it's behind 106.
Behind 106 is 112.
That's south of 112 is south of it.
that's on Crane Road, or off of Crane Road.
Might
Yeah.
be behind 98, could be.
It
No,
was.
I think it's-
I double checked
isn't
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was Mr. DeGraff of 102.
Okay, so the purpose of this is basically to give you corresponding elevations from the court at 19 and the neighboring houses, and the distances showing that the houses on Pear Tree Point Road are further than the Fisk house and considerably further. I mean, it's a material difference, at least 10% more, basically. In any event,
But the house is blocking. I guess not. Maybe not. The house is not, and there's not landscaping.
We're gonna get to the landscaping in a minute.
okay, so let me go through what the changes have made. The applicants made significant changes since the last meeting, hearing.
You were switching to the next topic.
I'm dealing with lighting, and I'm
Okay.
gonna, in terms of the concerns of the neighbors.
Okay.
Okay? So, but hopefully Douglas Clark is on, but we'll see. So we made significant changes to address neighbor concerns. We reduced the intensity of the court lighting from a competition standard, which is 42 foot candles per square foot roughly, down to recreational, which is 22 foot candles per square foot. It's basically halving the intensity of the lighting. So instead of having two banks or cells of LED lights in a light fixture, we now have one, half the lighting that was proposed before. And we now have a single set in each of our light fixtures, with 4 of the light fixtures, and the manufacturer provides shields that are installed as part of the design, and those are going to further reduce the migration of light off the court. And Gary Novosel, our lighting expert, will explain the change in photometrics, because we provided those details to you. But in addition to the shields and reducing the intensity of the lighting, we've substantially beefed up the landscaping, because in looking from the site at the neighbors and back at the site, we realized there were some holes in the existing landscaping. And to address those concerns, we have substantially upgraded the landscaping plan. And if you could switch to Exhibit 7, which is labeled Overall Site Development Plan, and it's issued for review, and the changes have been bubbled in red bubbles on the right side of this exhibit. There are essentially no changes on the left side.
Okay, so Exhibit 7 is up on the
Exhibit 7,
screen, and it's
okay.
also on TV 79.
All right, so is Doug Clark available?
Hi, Wilder. I'm
Hi,
here.
Doug. Could you take the commission through the changes we've made to the landscaping plan?
Yes, of course. So after the April 21st hearing, myself and
excuse-
the project,
Doug, excuse me, you need to identify
Yes.
yourself for the record, Douglas Clark.
you got it. I'm Douglas Clark. I'm with Janice Parker Landscape Architects. I'm the project architect, landscape architect for this project at 20 Juniper. Apologies. So after the April 21st hearing, myself and the project architect Scott Races visited the site, and observed the wood line to the east, noting the properties that were concerned about the pickleball court lighting. And we determined that the southeast corner was fairly closed, and that the gaps that we saw were to the east and to the northeast. However, the wooded line, it is a very already wooded line. But nonetheless, we decided that it would be best to plant some more evergreens. So we are proposing to transplant a mature American holly, 24-foot height that exists on the property. It's about 8 feet wide. And in addition to that, 12 evergreens consisting of eastern white cedars and Hollywood junipers. They're going to range from 8 to 12 feet height, and we'll cover the remaining gaps as you can see on the plan here. It'll be staggered groupings of the various heights. It'll naturalize the wooded property. And they would also be planted on this ridge line. If you were able to see the topography, it's about 4 foot higher than the pickleball court. So in effect, the 8 to 12 foot high trees that we're proposing to plant will be effectively 12 to 16 feet high overall. Not only that, we're also saying these are fast growing trees according to a manual that we follow a lot. It's a manual of woody landscape plants by Michael Durr. These plants are medium to fast growing plants. That means they will grow anywhere from 13 to 24 inches per year. The juniper is even faster at 25 inches or more per year. And into all these new plantings to screen and close the gaps on the eastern edge, we've also beefed up the crabapple trees to the east of the court, the 7 Malice, Donald Wyman. They were a 3-inch caliper tree. We're beefing them up to 4 to 4.5 inch caliper trees. That means they're more mature and they have a broader and taller canopy. Overall, these trees will grow to be 15 to 20 feet high with a 17 to 22 foot spread. So they will be significant trees, and they will take the mid-story level of the viewport, the view line there. Not to say that the wood line and the evergreen trees should be already covering that zone. And in addition to this, we are proposing another evergreen border directly around the pickleball court. Before we're proposing 44 evergreen shrubs around the perimeter of the court, we're adding an 11 additional to the east, just to make sure that any light reflecting off the court would be obscured entirely by this vegetation. So we've added significant land plantings to this plan to ensure that we are being neighborly.
Great. Thank you, Douglas. Questions?
Very
Yes,
welcome.
real quick. Doug, it's just to confirm, and all the commissioners know, Wiley, can you just point out on your exhibit on the bottom the 4 trees that are being taken out?
For
The evergreens.
If you look at the bottom of the exhibit, there's red X's at the lowest portion, basically a little bit just south of the house. There's 4 evergreen trees which block the most important view south. And frankly, they've grown up over the past 10, 15 years, and we intend to take them out. We're adding over 33 trees to the landscape. So we feel we're compensating more than adequately here for the loss of these trees, which don't affect anyone else's views except ours.
Right, exactly. Okay.
Correct. And not only that, we are revegetating that area with native grasses and shrubs.
Right. There's over 2,000 native grasses and shrubs proposed in this landscape plan, in addition to the 33 trees we're installing. And these aren't little 2-inch caliper. We're talking 6-inch caliper here, and a mature ilex, and then 8 to 12 foot evergreens. So these are all very significant, and they will provide instant screening.
Excuse me, Doug, right? Doug, this is Steve Alvani, Chairman of the Commission. You can see my, there I am.
Hello.
Hey there. With regards to, right now, it looks like there's apple trees or pear trees that are next to the spot where the pickleball court's going to be. And just to confirm, for everybody's edification, the existing garden, vegetable garden there that's fenced in with chicken wire is staying, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So that's staying. The pickleball is going to be just south of that existing vegetable garden. So then along that line, which is going to be I want to say it's the east side of the proposed pickleball court, there's like,
Correct.
it's either 4 or 7 apple trees.
I think they were.
The crab apples, they're fairly diseased and not faring very well. They're in about a 3 to 2.5 inch caliper. They are fairly small. They're remnants of past caretaking.
Those are staying or going?
Those are out of there.
All right, those
Those are going.
Okay.
To be replaced by 7 mature 6-inch caliper trees.
Where is he?
The crab apples are 4.5 inch caliper. There are 6 inch caliper trees to the southwest, which will be oak trees, and then several oak trees around the pool area as well.
So those 7 trees that are closest to the proposed pickleball court, those are the new pear trees?
Those are the new ones at 4.5 inch caliper.
And those are what kind of trees again? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Malice Donald Wyman, a crabapple tree.
Crabapple trees. So you're replacing crabapple trees with crabapple trees, basically.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Okay. And then the first line of evergreens are going to be in the back, right?
They're going to be placed along the edge of the already wooded woodland there, amongst our new wetland buffer plantings as well.
You know when you go out to the site and there's a bunch of stones that create a border between the grass and the...
I do.
Okay.
I do.
What side
Yes.
of those stones are they going to be on? On the water side?
Those stones are actually going to be removed. We're going to naturalize the border with these native grasses, the panicum,
Okay.
and the Indian grass.
Okay.
So that stone border is going to go away, but it will be it will be the new border of the wooded edge.
Okay. And some of these bushes and trees you're putting in, they're besides one that around the court are also closer to the ground, right? They're not all going to be... I mean, Susan Cameron...
I'm sorry, I don't follow.
They're evergreen, so they might get tall, but the bottom part is still going to be...
Yes,
tall.
yes. No, they're also specifically chosen for that characteristic. They remain full to the ground. They're not like a white pine or a spruce as they get larger and more mature, that they kind of lose their bottoms or the skirts kind of raise. No, these are full to the bottom, correct.
Okay, great. Let's go around the horn. Jennifer, any questions? Jennifer Leahy? You gotta turn your mic on, Jen. No questions. No questions.
No, I
Thanks,
don't
Jen.
think.
Jen's good. Larry Warble, any questions?
So just to confirm, you're essentially filling in all the gaps in sight
Yes, sir.
line to the pickleball.
Yes, and you
court.
can see on the
I think
plan
that's
the
what I
existing. I'm sorry to speak over.
Yeah,
The
I'm sorry.
existing plan shows evergreen trees that are on the plan that remain on the site, and we are trying to close those gaps and those where it might not be as sparsely wooded, or where it is lightly wooded.
Right. So, yes, to confirm, you're filling in those gaps, or you're
Correct.
just right. And just one general comment, Wilder. These attachments are great, and thank you so much for labeling them and numbering them so that we can find them easy. That's really made this a lot easier process for me on this side. I know you commented about lighting already. And maybe just because you talked about a hood or a screen that's going on the lights.
We have the lighting expert coming up
We're
next,
still
Larry.
going to have a lighting expert, but I guess I'll just ask my question now and he can address when he talks. Will there be sort of any naked bulbs that can be seen from any direction, or will the lighting only be basically the light reflecting off the court, if you will?
Is that my cue to start speaking?
No, not yet, but.
Not
No,
yet,
not
let's just,
yet. Maybe when you do your when you
we'll
do your
get to you in a
presentation.
minute, okay?
Okay.
And that's when those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Jim Rand. Any questions, Jim?
My question is perhaps more for Jeremy than the applicant. I find Exhibit 7, the first page of it, difficult to understand only because I suspect I'm not sufficiently experienced to know what the significance of the red circles and the gray circles and so on and so forth is.
Actually,
But
Jim,
that having been said, are you sufficiently comfortable with this, Jeremy, so that when this whole thing is finished and somebody goes over there to make sure that the applicant has done everything that it said it was going to do in the application, that you can figure it out?
well, there's a couple questions in there, Jim, so I'll start with the first one, which is oftentimes each architecture firm or engineering firm is a little different. Sometimes when you see the red bubbles, that means that's something that has changed since the last version. So some architects or landscape architects or engineers will use the red bubbles or some kind of notation like is shown here. That just means that is something that's changed. So I wanted to mention that. The other item is that the lit tennis court or pickleball court or whatever kind of court it's going to be is a special permit use, which requires a 25-foot buffer. And so that's what we're talking about on the east side of the property here, and certainly on the north, as Wilder noted at the last meeting, there's a conservation easement, so there's plenty of buffer there. There's existing trees to the south and the existing houses to the west. So that's a requirement of the regulations that the special permit use have a 25-foot buffer. Certainly, when if the commission were to approve this with conditions, oftentimes when the applicant and their landscape architect is out at the site, some things might need to be field adjusted. Certainly that'll be something that the commission can handle as part of its decision making, is the leeway they give planning and zoning staff and landscape architect to move things around a little bit in the field to come up with, I'll call it a better solution that will do a job. I think what Larry referenced is filling in gaps, coming up with a more complete buffer. So I think both Jim and Larry seem to be along the similar path in terms of having the applicant out in the field maybe adjust things a little bit to come up with an even better solution than what might be here on paper.
And I think I just want to add, can you double check with Doug,
Yeah.
which on here I think is his wife's name. To me, I think all the gray on this plan are existing, all the red on this
That's
plan
correct.
are new. And all the red on the plan is new.
Yes, sepia red, sure, yes, exactly.
The
Right.
bubble red.
Well, it, not necessarily bubble red. Like here, right?
The
These
bubbles
seven-
around the text are revisions to changes on the plan. The sepia or the red, what I guess you may be calling red circles are or yellow circles are the new plantings.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah. See, all this stuff is in red. That's the new stuff.
But
All the stuff
X,
that's gray.
Right, it may be yellow on some.
Right.
It may read as red, but.
But the legend up here even says it.
So, Jim, does that answer your question? Does it help you understand what new stuff is proposed
I'm happy.
and identify
Thank you.
that
Question.
adequately? Great.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Next up is George Riley. Any questions, George?
No, sir. Thank you.
Kara Gately, any questions on this?
I guess, in terms of the lights, so they've moved from competition grade.
We're not doing the lights. That light expert's going to speak in a second.
Okay, I thought they spoke about lights and lights with respect to the shading, but
Right.
okay, if I'm not allowed to talk,
No, you're allowed to talk. There's a lighting expert coming up next.
good, I'll talk later, Steve.
Okay?
Okay, are we done with Doug?
We're done with Doug, yes.
All right, at this point, I think I'd like to introduce Gary Novosel, who is our lighting expert. And you should turn now to exhibits, let's see, we did.
4, 5, and
Oh, you know,
6.
Doug, we didn't cover your planting plan, the list of plants. But that just was revised for the record to incorporate 13 new plants and take the total of trees from 20 to 33 or 35. I think it's over 33 plants, trees that we're installing now. So
That's
I'm
Exhibit
not
8.
sure we really need to look at
It's Exhibit 8. We're done.
Exhibit 8. Let's go back to Exhibit 4. And I'm going to ask Gary Novosel, our lighting designer, to speak to that. Exhibit 4 is the manufacturer's cut sheet, I think, for the lighting fixture.
Yes, thank you, Wilder. So Wilder did mention and cover the bigger, larger, sweeping features of the fixture, but I'll get into a little bit more specifics. So first, he had mentioned that we reduce the overall lighting level. When you're lighting a sport court or many other things, there are a few different recommended levels by the Illuminating Engineers Society, who study such things. And you can have a professional level, you can have a recreational level, you can have a country club level. And we started out the program with the higher level. And Paul, in his quest to be a good neighbor and to do everything in his power to make this more palatable and provide as much protection as possible, he agreed that we could bring this down to a lower level, which was essentially half of the light output. And so that means that we've got less light to deal with in the first place. Then the second thing is that this fixture, if you read the specifications, it's called out as something called a cutoff fixture. And a cutoff fixture is designed specifically and purposefully to allow the light to cover a certain area, and then there is a cutoff, there's a visual cutoff beyond that area so that there's no brightness to the light fixture whatsoever. Now, we have some photometric studies, which we'll get to in a moment, that show that line on the ground, which happens approximately 45 to 65 feet away. The other thing I'd like to discuss on this particular spec sheet is that there are certain factory options that are available. And there's one of them that's commonly known as a house side shield. This manufacturer calls it an angled shield. Do we have the second page that we can view?
Yes.
So there is a little photograph of it.
Second page of Exhibit 4.
Second
Okay,
page
great.
of Exhibit
So
4.
highlighted on the left, you'll see the S213 angled back light shield. And you can see that the shields actually mount at the LED light source. And that shield is positioned towards the east, towards Fair Tree River Point. So the fixtures on the east side of the court have that shield towards the river. The fixtures on the other side of the court, they're facing the wrong direction, of course, for shielding in that view. And that's why we rely on these photometric studies, which if we could proceed to that, Wilder, I can show what's called an ISO diagram.
That's the
And
next
it's essentially a computer
Exhibit
model
5.
of these light fixtures located in space where they are at 15 feet, which also is a footnote, that was lowered.
Is this Exhibit 5 we're looking for?
Yes, it's Exhibit 5. It's labeled pickleball court.
Wilder, it would be my page L3, my drawing L3.
And it's
That's L2, one more. There we go, L3. So what you can see, no, if you back up one, please.
we're looking at L2.
Okay, great. So if you look at the drawing, you see in the center is the pickleball court. And then there are a whole series of numbers. The large numbers are essentially 20 feet apart, and they represent foot candles on the ground at that point. So if you look to the east, which is to the bottom of the drawing, you will see that red circle that is marked as 0.1. That's where you have 1/10 of 1 foot candle falling on the ground. And beyond that is 0. And that measurement from to the east is about 70 feet. So after 70 feet, there is essentially no lighting. So anyone standing and looking would look up at that fixture and see nothing but dark. So we have a combination of a cutoff fixture and a house side shield from the lighting perspective, as well as lowered post heights. And then, of course, that's supplemented by the additional screening the landscaping provides. The other thing that we wanted to be concerned about was not the direct view of into the light fixture source, but what you might call the glow. The glow would be something that you would appreciate more on a foggy evening, where even if you didn't see the light fixture's light source, you would see a reflection off of the pickleball court that only is available to be seen if there's mist in the air. So smoke, fog, rain, snow, you would see it. But on a clear night, you wouldn't see anything. So to mask that glow, the landscape architect has surrounded the pickleball court with some low-dense plantings. So between the physical characteristics of the light fixtures themselves, the glare shields, the photometric report, the additional screening immediately surrounding the pickleball court, and then the screening further away of dense evergreens, I feel quite confident that we've done everything to negate any negative impact on any neighbors.
Okay, thank you. I really don't have any
questions?
I don't have any questions for you, Gary, but let's start with the commission. Kara Gately, you want to go first this time?
So thank you very much. That was very clear. So 70 feet out, I just want to make sure that I'm measuring correctly, gets you just over the mean high water mark. On the, what is that, south? So what is that? Southeast side, right? Okay, what do you mean? Where are we about? Or maybe it's less than that. Can someone with a proper? I need to get my ruler.
I might be able to scale that for you.
Kara,
It's approximately a bit, right?
Jennifer, it's 120 feet to mean high water from the edge of the pickleball court.
Yeah, I can scale this in 1 second.
Let Gary do it. You do that.
He doesn't have this survey.
No, he said he could do it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm looking at the Janice Barker landscape plan that you're looking at before. And from the east side of the pickleball court, 70 feet would put us. Do you see the? If we go back to that drawing, there is a dotted line that's called out as the erosion control barrier.
Exhibit 7.
Right. Okay. Blue.
Do you want to get on the screen?
What document are you on?
Exhibit 7. He's looking at Exhibit 7.
Exhibit 7.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Fred.
You got it.
Go ahead, Gary. We're ready.
This
All
is
right,
Douglas
so if you
Clark.
have
The line, the closest, the water line is about 72 feet from the pickleball court.
At its closest.
Okay. Great.
Mean high water.
Wait, Douglas, I'm getting 90.
Still 4.
I'm sorry? Oh, to mean high water line. I'm sorry. I'm going to the...
It's closer to 90 to the mean high water line.
Correct.
Was
But
that?
I need,
So basically,
Correct.
we're not. Let's say if there were no coverage, there would be no light hitting any. There would be no there's no water that's hitting, more or less. or very little water?
No water.
No water.
Light ends at 70 feet, we have 90 feet to mean high water, and the photometrics don't consider the landscaping that screens it, or the house and garage that screen it. The
No, the house and
photometric
garage
assumes a
don't
flat
screen.
field with no obstructions.
Thank you.
Okay, Carrie Gately, you're next. Thanks, Jen.
How high, the current lights that they're gonna use, which are recreation grade, has the height changed or just the intensity of the bulbs between recreation grade and competition grade lights?
It's an excellent question. It is the identical fixture in all ways, except at the factory, they can load it with what they call bricks or cells. So we have gone from a 2-cell fixture to a 1-cell fixture, and hence halved the output.
Okay, and so how high will the light fixtures be?
This is a
From ground level,
15-foot.
not from,
Yeah, these fixtures are mounted on a 15-foot pole, and they don't sit on top of the pole, but rather they cantilever off the side, so they would be no higher than 15 feet. I would estimate they'll be at about, the light source will be about 14 feet 9 inches, 14 feet 8 inches.
so the current plantings that are considered, they may go higher than the current plantings that are screening it? Understand
Well, no,
it
actually,
will be going down.
so if we have an elevation of 19 elevation at the pickleball court, and then we're up, call it 15 feet for the fixture, that gives us elevation of 34.
Yep.
And then as you move to the east, there's a ridge line that Doug had mentioned, which is elevation 23. On top of that ridge line, we planted trees that are another 8 to 12 feet tall, which
Yep.
brings us to elevation 31 to 35. So we have screening up to elevation 35, which is a foot higher than the top of the fixture.
And those
And,
plants are expected
and then when you look, Doug, are you still on? Can you address?
I'm here.
growth
I
patterns,
didn't
the
hear the
growth
question. I'm here. I didn't hear the question.
The
I'm sorry.
question was the question was the coverage that the trees will provide now, as opposed to over time as they mature.
Oh yes, like I said, they're medium to fast growing trees. The eastern white cedar grows about 13 to 24 inches a year, and then the juniper more than 25 inches a year.
Okay. And so given the elevation changes, despite the elevation with the light fixtures, given the ridge, and then the current height of the anticipated plantings with their growth potential, they should
Yes, definitely
coverage.
cover, and not to mention the evergreen screening, but also the crab apples. Those will get over 20 feet tall as well.
On that higher ridgeline.
The crab apples are upland of the pickleball court about 2 feet, and the evergreens are about 4 feet, 2 to 4 feet higher than the pickleball court. So in effect, you get, instead of we're proposing 8 to 12 foot high evergreens. In effect, when they are planted on the ridgeline, they end up being 12 to 16 foot high evergreens
So
to the pickleball court elevation.
still initially considerably lower than the poles.
Consider, I would say, they are at the pole height.
You're putting an 8-foot tree, you're putting a 10-foot tree on top of a ridge that's 4 feet up, right? So that's
Correct.
So that's 14 feet. 10 plus 4 is 14. And
And then
Yeah.
34 feet,
And-
which is what the poles are at.
and the pole is 14 feet 9 inches high. So we're talking, 6 inches.
On an elevation of,
Right, and then we also have the crab apples, which are 4.5 inch caliper, which will be 14 feet high coming in, plus the big growth, and the American holly, which we are transplanting, which is 24 feet high and 8 feet wide.
so there'll be a slight disparity at first, and then it's anticipated that it'll catch
Within
up.
a year, the gap would be covered.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. Larry Warble, any questions, sir?
I just want to confirm that I heard what I thought I heard. So with the covers on the lights, even, and by the way, the screening sounds wonderful, and I understand my question is kind of acting as if it's not there, but just to say, someone looking in from another side won't be able to actually see the naked bulbs. They would only see the light. The only light they would really see is coming off of the court or coming off mid-snow or things like that. If we had those weather
Well,
conditions.
actually, we've got the court
The
shielded.
court is lit.
So the only light that they might see would be spilling on the lawn beyond those hedges that surround the court. You should not be able to see any of the light source whatsoever beyond 7
Right.
feet.
So maybe I'll just ask it in a more simple English question. Would someone be able to tell, someone, from outside, from where the lumens, the candle light gets to zero, would they be able to know if the light was on or off?
They know that it's on, but not because they could see directly to the light source. They would just see the illumination of all the plant material around it.
Yeah, okay, that was my question. I think that's fine. Okay. Thank you very much. No other questions.
George Riley, any questions, sir?
All good, thank you.
Jim Rand, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, from my schedule, we're on to exhibits 9 and 10.
9 and 10 are pictures that I took from what I thought was a neighboring house, and it was from 106, and where did those go?
Well, that's good.
106, I stood in the driveway near the front door, and I looked over a hedge that separates the adjacent house from Pear Tree Point Road. And I took, the first picture was 1 for 1. And then standing in the same place, I zoomed in 5 times. And you can see, at least from this house in this perspective, the existing landscaping is quite effective. You can't see the face of the house that is on the east side, and the south side of the garage is largely obstructed. And with the supplemental plantings, I'm absolutely confident there'll be no issue with that house, even though I don't think even with, I'm not sure they'd have a concern even now from that perspective. I did not walk up, I didn't realize it was 102, so I did not go up, and it's a private drive, and I felt I'd pushed as much as I could to give you guys an idea of what we're looking at from the neighbor's perspective. So,
Okay.
in terms of, then the question I think is conditions, if any,
Okay.
on the lighting.
Does anybody have any general questions for Wilder on any issue at this point, commissioners?
I do not have any questions.
Kara, you good? Kara? No? George
I'm fine.
Riley, you're good? George Riley?
I'm fine.
Jim Rand?
I'm fine, thank you.
Larry?
Yeah, all good. Thanks.
Jennifer?
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Great, thank you. Do we miss anything at this point?
No, if there's anyone here from the public, that would be the only.
The first thing I want to do is the stipulations relative to the time.
Right, one thing I would like to mention, and we've talked about what I emailed to commission members earlier today, this is Jeremy Ginsburg, Planning and Zoning Director, was I emailed commission recent approvals that were issued by your predecessors for various courts, tennis courts, for various properties in town, country clubs, the depot. I think there were 5 or 6 of them that I passed along to Mr. Gleason, and I also passed it along to the commission. The commission members, you can see in those approvals, as well as the Manila approval for Horseshoe Road, that past commissions have put various conditions on lighting and lighting use relative to hours and automatic timers and things like that. So I think that's what you're referring to here, Steve.
Yes. How long do you want the lights on?
Well, we had requested 10:30 during weeknights and midnight on weekends. I think I talked to Paul in light of the approvals that we've already seen, where the depot, which we think is analogous to us, we're in the middle of something there, in the middle of, very few people are going to be affected. They're at 11, and Woodway Country Club has an 11 p.m. curfew. And it would seem appropriate. I drove by Woodway, and their courts are actually within 100 feet or so of Hoyt Street, and their residences adjacent on the other side. And there were no stipulations that they had to screen the lights, and the lights are 4 or 5 feet above the existing trees, and those courts were installed a while ago. So it would seem 11 o'clock for them. It would be great if we could get 11 o'clock for us. And I think Paul is happy to have a timer installed on it to make sure it doesn't go over 11 p.m. That's Paul, yeah. Paul, is that correct? Paul, is that acceptable to you at 11 p.m.?
Yes, that's fine. 11 o'clock, great, and we'll have the appropriate time controls on it, yes.
Okay, so it's 11, so you're asking for 11 o'clock
Just
weekend?
keep it simple, weekends and weeknights.
Okay. Jennifer Leahy, any thoughts on that?
I'm okay with it.
Larry Warble?
Yeah, no questions.
Okay. Jim Rand, any thoughts on 11 o'clock?
Oh, I'm okay with it.
George Riley, thoughts on 11 o'clock?
Fine by me.
Okay. Kara Gately, thoughts on 11 o'clock?
I don't necessarily have any problem with 11 o'clock, and I actually really appreciate that Mr. Rabacha is willing to put timers on the lights. I really appreciate that. I just sort of have an issue with comparing and saying that they're most comparable to the depot, because the depot is not in a residential area. The depot is sandwiched between 95 and the Metro North train tracks and commercial real estate and retail. So I think, just for the record to be clear, to say that you're most comparable in a residential neighborhood on coastal and nature preserved wetlands in a residential area, that you're most comparable to the depot, which serves the public and at-risk youth and teenagers and serves the community, and is sandwiched between 95, the Metro North, Amtrak train tracks, the Post Road, and commercial and retail real estate, is comparable. I have to take issue with that. But otherwise, I have no issue with 11 p.m. other than saying that you're most comparable to the depot.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's my. And if, but okay.
Yeah, this Larry, I just want to clarify to make sure I understood it correctly. So are we going to 11 all nights, or 11 just the weekend nights and still staying at 10 on the weeknights?
He's asked for 11, 365 days a year.
Oh, I was confused. Larry, what do you think?
I'll ask Walter another question. Do any other residential, not country clubs, not the depot, in between the train tracks, the 95, and all the commercial buildings and the Post Road, does any other residential home in a residential neighborhood have 365 days a week commercial grade lighting?
Well, let's say Jeremy asked that question.
I don't know. Do the Manellas?
I think the Manellas would be, in terms of that, the Manella property, I think, is on an acre and a half or 2 acres.
2.5 acres.
2.5 acres on Horseshoe Road in a residential zone. And we gave the commission the approval of that. It was a sport court / ice rink with the various provisions and restrictions on hours and landscaping. And so Wilder has that, and the commission has that, and that's part of the record, that Manila approval.
The Manila approval,
During the week?
Well, what's?
let me go back to your question. I believe there are sport courts that are lit that don't have time limitations on them because they were adopted before, 25, 30 years ago, okay?
Can you get us those?
I'm sorry?
Can you get us information on those?
I don't have it, and I'm not able to get it to you. I know that Wyman Proctor, a former planning and zoning commissioner, had a lit tennis court on his house off of Middlesex Road. And I don't think there were limitations on it, and it was, and I am absolutely confident that the poles for that court were higher than 15
Well,
feet.
let's not get into that.
So,
Pick the time.
but,
the
you know-
Manila's is 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock.
Manila is apples to oranges here. Manila
How
is
so?
an application that involved a hockey rink with
Rick,
chillers.
can I make a suggestion? Can I make a suggestion here?
Sure.
This is Paul. Why don't we go with 11 o'clock? If I can make a suggestion, that we go with 11 o'clock on weekend nights and 10:30 on the weekday nights. I think does that address the questions of the commissioner?
With a timer?
Oh, yeah, they will.
With a timer.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yes. Yeah.
Of course.
You have to understand, this is a second home that Paul and his wife Bambi would come to.
Totally get it.
And the likelihood of it being used intensely is pretty remote.
Okay, well, you're asking for 10:30 and 11.
10:30 and 11.
Okay.
And that would be federal holidays and weekends.
Okay, and the Manila application is 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, so.
And we think Manila, since it involved a hockey rink with
The
teenagers
Manila property
and
does not
lots
have
of people
time
on it.
It would have a timer, and with a time, right, so there are different precedents, which I think is important. That if you're changing already in place precedent, the residential neighborhood home, and I think the timer, I think, is a distinguishing factor. It has an additional safeguard, and I think given the additional safeguard of the timer, I'm comfortable making that step away from previously set precedent. Other commissioners can, speak on their feelings on that. That's my position.
Okay. We can go over into the.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I free to go?
Who's that?
It's Gary Novosel. Am I free to hang up?
I think we're done with
I
him.
think we're done with Gary. Anyone have questions of Gary?
See a lot of no's.
No, he's
All
good.
right, then. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay,
All right, so
all right,
that would be it. And
we'll deliberate.
yeah, okay. I would ask that, we've been delayed. We have construction crews there. The sooner we can get a decision. I know you guys are working under constraints, but I really would love to move forward if we can on this.
Yeah, we're not gonna deliberate today, I don't think.
Okay.
It's not on the agenda.
Not on the agenda.
Yeah.
We'll put it on for an upcoming, it won't be next week, but maybe the week after.
Maybe the
Okay.
week after, that would be terrific.
Okay,
Great.
wrap it up. What do we got?
Nothing to wrap up, just whoever's here from the public, I have nothing to add on this.
Would anyone from the public like to speak to this application? We don't have anything in the chat. There's 18 people on here. And I don't see anybody texting anybody. You don't have anybody asking you, right, Fred?
That's correct, I have nothing.
Okay, and you're all done?
I'm all done.
Okay, I entertain a motion to close. Jennifer?
Motion.
I think I saw a second from Kara Gately.
Second.
All those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Great.
6.
Thank you, Wiley.
Thank you all.
All set.
Can we get caller 2 to identify themselves unless someone else knows who that is?
Say it again, Jen?
Don't we, are we supposed to identify who we are in the attendees?
Well, we can see your name and we can see your hand, and yes, we know that you
made
posed that one and Kara seconded it.
No, caller 2 in the list of attendees. Remember how we?
This is Nick Fletcher. I'm in the audio as well.
Oh, hey Nick. Sorry, I didn't.
Hi, how are you, Jennifer? Sorry about that, guys.
All right, moving on.
You're already up here. No, there's another call. There's two networkers.
Okay, he's on audio and
I'm
video.
on video and audio, correct?
Oh, God, sorry, I was looking at that.
Okay, I would like to get a motion to amend the agenda. I want to move the, thank you. I'd like to move the possible discussion regarding the temporary allowance for outdoor seating for restaurants pursuant to the possible restrictions set by Governor Vermont up next. There's the motion. Is there a second?
Who made the
From
motion?
Jennifer? Jennifer Levy did. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next, so what I'm going to do is this is the discussion of Governor Lamont has made a statement that he would like to allow for restaurants and certain shops to be open on May 20th. With that said, the first selectman and I and Jeremy have had some discussions with regards to this. We would like to allow the restaurants to open up on that date with outdoor seating as per the governor's thought process. This is something that we already do here in the town of Darien. Oddly enough, tonight is Cinco de Mayo, and every year since I've been around, David Genovese, who owns the bodega store, has a party. They have an outdoor temporary seating in their back parking lot for Cinco de Mayo. Another similar one to that is the Darien Center Street Public House on St. Patrick's Day. They put a tent in their back and have outdoor seating for more expanded parties. So what we would like to do is do a blanket thought process or quote-unquote approval to do outdoor seating on a temporary basis pursuant to the liquor laws of Darien if they do have a liquor license, and the health department for Darien. Some of the parking lots behind some of our restaurants are municipal. The first selectman, if we receive an application or a request to put outdoor seating in a public parking lot, a municipal parking lot, the first selectman will have to grant that. The board of selectmen will have to grant that. They have said, or the first selectman said that she would put this on their agenda as soon as possible and act on it as soon as possible with her current procedural, whatever she has relative to authority. She might be able to approve it by herself. With that said, what I would like to do is discuss this issue and then give Jeremy the administrative abilities to approve these things as they come in, subject to all the requirements that are on there. Earlier today, you got a photo of an email from, it actually came from Jamie to me and Jeremy. It's from the Consumer Protection, the Connecticut, I think it's Connecticut Consumer Protection Authority, that says you're going to waive the fees if anyone wants to do this. And attached to that is another link which goes to the Liquor Control Board that says if you want this and you serve liquor, you have to fill out these documents. It gets signed by the planning and zoning director, the health department, the fire department. So that's where this all came from. I'd like to open it up to Jeremy and have Jeremy add to anything that I missed. Then if any commissioners have any questions, and then David Genovese was nice enough to volunteer to speak to this issue since he is a landlord for a number of the restaurants, and I think he has some of his restaurateurs on call for us. Did I pretty much summarize, Jeremy?
That was a good summary, Steve. In terms of what's likely on the horizon for the next 2 weeks, nothing is certain at this point, but the governor has hinted that that might be a possibility where restaurants can open up outdoor only on May 20th and have customers sit down at a table outdoors. And being that it's about 2 weeks away, we expect to see numerous restaurants who might not have outdoor seating now want to come for some outdoor seating on a temporary basis, likely within their parking lot, a portion of their parking lot, or in a nearby municipal parking lot. And so we wanted to put that on the agenda for today to try to figure out a way, if possible, to accommodate many of these requests, as we're expecting quite a few that might come in the next 2 weeks. And I think one of the issues for the commission is any parameters on or limits, and if there are these I'll call them temporary site plan approvals to operate outside, how long you would want these to run for. So we wanted to bring that up tonight, and I think Steve's outlined what we foresee at this point to be a likely outcome and what the governor is likely to allow restaurants to do with some parameters.
I'm just going to add one more thing to it. With regards to timing, my personal proposal is to keep this through 4th of July weekend, where it would sunset on Monday, July 6th. We can always extend if we want to, and the government might open up sooner than that. And also another thing to discuss or just to think about is, for argument's sake, or for an example, say Sugar Bowl wants to come up and do this. Sugar Bowl doesn't really have a parking lot in the back, but they already have the right to put tables on their sidewalk. If they wanted additional tables on their sidewalk, and it was possible and agreed to by an adjacent property owner, such as next to, if you're on the post road, next to Sugar Bowl is Kirby and Company. If the landlord for Kirby and Company would allow Sugar Bowl to put tables in front of their store, that would be something that the tenants would work out amongst themselves and landlords amongst themselves. So with that said, I'd like to open it up to the commissioners, starting with Jennifer first. Any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas?
I'm all for it. I am very, anything to help restaurant owners and to help everyone get back on their feet, I'm all for it. I'm sure it'll be a rigorous process to figure out social distancing and how to utilize outdoor space, but I am all for it.
Thank you. My thought is to have they're going to come up with a plan, which is a sketch, which is already required by Jeremy's office anyway, and then make sure that the health department person reviews this. I think he already has a copy of this, so David Knopf is more qualified than we are to say that these tables are 6 feet apart. Thank you.
Great.
Larry Warble, any comments?
I am also all for this, and I had just an additional thought, and even though this is probably nothing that we can consider, but I'm just going to throw it out anyway, because if when you mention something like the Sugar Bowl where the sidewalks are kind of narrow,
Right.
This is almost the opposite of our parking discussion. Actually, this is the opposite of our parking discussion last week. But is it possible maybe to suspend the parking in front of some of these places to give them some more space so that, like the table can take up the sidewalk and then pedestrians can go in the park, what is currently a parking spot.
We'll let Jeremy answer that question.
I'm also worried that some of our sidewalks are just too tight. And even if we say it's okay, they're not going to be able to get tables in for 6 feet. And is there something else we can do to help them out?
Jeremy Ginsburg, Planning and Zoning Director. Certainly, Larry, that's something that I thought about earlier today. I think what we have to talk about is 3 types of situations. One would be on Boston Post Road or Tokenique Road. Those are state roads, so the state is not going to allow, I'm sure, tables and chairs on street. On town roads, say Day Street or Grove Street, the possibility of closing off on-street parking would ultimately be up to the Board of Selectmen in consultation with Public Works and the police. There's that balance of safety and vehicles and things like that. Where that might work though, Larry, which I've given it some thought, is Center Street behind Louis and possibly behind what used to be the Irish Place and Back Street. That might be a possibility there. That seems to have a lot of potential there. Maybe Mechanic Street near Heights Pizza, I don't know. I think we'd have to work with the selectmen on a case-by-case basis on something like that.
just conceptually, that is something that I think we would all support.
Thank you. You good, Larry? Jim Rand, any questions, comments?
I'm in favor of it. I don't want us to get into meeting after meeting after meeting. Somebody wants to put some tables outside and we get into a long discussion about how far apart, how many, where precisely are they, what are the hours, and so on and so forth. I'd much rather think in terms of having some communication with Jamie or Jamie's office to come up with some guidelines and leave it to staff.
Yes, it's 100%. That's the proposal. It's all going to be administratively approved, which would be in addition to, it would be like an amendment, you call it an amendment to an existing application.
Amendment to existing site plans and special permits for these restaurants, but they're just temporary, whatever the commission decides in terms of the time limit, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is, with the final details to be worked out by staff.
Okay?
That's my only comment, thanks.
Thanks, Jim. George Riley, questions, comments?
I confess my instinctive reaction is not favorable towards ceding so much of our authority and responsibility over these special permits and how we're going to have people sitting in the middle of sidewalks around which people and children and all that will be walking, and in the middle of parking lots where there won't be parking anymore, and we're pushing parking to other places. I think there are a lot of issues with it, and classically in our bailiwick, I think Jim Rand makes a good point. We ought to have something in writing giving us some clue about what the parameters are here. And I think Larry was pointing out some of the issues that may come up and need to be dealt with. I certainly agree. I don't want to be a problem with restaurants getting this opportunity as quickly as possible. I think New Canaan is saying they'll meet as often as they have to in order to deal with any of these applications, and that would be my orientation, frankly. So, as of the moment, I just have that concern.
Okay, just so you know, like Bodega right now has the ability to, this is Stephen Alvani, has the ability to put tables in front of their restaurant on the post road on the sidewalk. So does Upples down, not Upples, Sugar Bowl.
Sugar Bowl does.
And also, if you remember Greaves Pharmacy, I think Greaves Pharmacy got tables allowed outside. I don't know if they got tables inside, but that's also on the post road. So it's not like it's foreign on the post road, but it's going to go, if it's possible, it would go down the street. With regards to approvals, the first order of business that each applicant or each restaurateur would put in a sketch and say where these things are going to go. If Jeremy has any reservations or questions, I can guarantee you he's going to bring it to the commission and say, this one's a little bit tricky. It definitely has to get approved by the fire department for access. And actually that's the liquor side. And it has to get approved by the health department. So that's the one caveat we have there. Okay?
So it has to get a bunch of approvals, but not by us, who would otherwise be involved. So, as I say, I'm just a little leery of that. And I would certainly encourage Jeremy to share with us whatever plans he does see, so that if we had issues as we saw them, we could raise them.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough.
That's fair enough.
Yep.
That's easy. Okay. Carrie Gately, any questions, comments, thoughts?
Like Jennifer and Larry and Jim, I'm very in favor of getting out of the way and doing whatever we can to support businesses, especially small businesses and local businesses, getting back on their feet and being able to operate as to the best that they can, given the governor's restrictions. I hear George's point in that we should be involved, but I think given, how Fred and Jeremy operate, if we do a blanket approval now, so that from an administrative bureaucracy perspective, we're not, slowing down the wheels of allowing small businesses and restaurants to get back on their feet and begin to operate to the best that they can without having, to do a whole public hearing process, which by its very nature involves notices and postings in a number of hearings. If we can streamline that process, which Stanford does in a number of situations, I think that's advisable if we give parameters and a certain approval, and then they're approved administratively, and things that maybe fall outside of what we approve will come to the commission. But if it's things that Jeremy, that we think the office can approve administratively, I think given this situation and given the incredible burden and stress that small businesses and local restaurants are under right now, I am very for this. I also think, though, as a commission, we are a planning and zoning commission. So I think while we often operate in our zoning avenue, I think in this, very unprecedented, or in my lifetime unprecedented anyway, situation, I think we need to think about putting our planning hat on and consider ways that we can be proactive. And right, so now we're acting, and we're taking sort of very quick, immediate response to the governor and his, reopening Connecticut Commission's advice and sort of, position on when businesses make it open. I think we need to think about, okay, how can we be proactive, and how can we, from a planning perspective, help our local businesses, especially given that our, plan of conservation development speaks of wanting a vibrant downtown and wanting, to encourage a vibrant pedestrian downtown. I think we need to think about businesses and what we can be doing proactively as a planning board. So that's, I wholeheartedly support this, and I really am thankful, Steve and Jeremy and everybody that put this on the agenda and that we're considering it, given, the experiences that everybody's going through right now.
Okay, thank you, Kara. I want to let David Genovese speak.
Sure.
Mr. Genovese, I see that you're online. I appreciate your coming. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas relative to this topic.
Sure, thanks, Steve. David Genovese from Baywater Properties. As Steve pointed out, we own a bunch of the properties around downtown and have a few restaurants as tenants. I'm going to be really brief because I talked too much last meeting. And you guys are working hard. And I want to say first, we really appreciate all your efforts and your responsiveness. Jeremy and Steve in particular on this issue in the last couple of days have been, flooding us with information so we can kind of help our customers navigate these uncharted waters. And more importantly, probably, I've got with me here via Zoom, David Nelson, the operating partner of 1020 Post, and Mario Fontana, who pulled away from Cinco de Mayo at Bodega to answer any questions you may have. But we're all just very grateful for this. I think that we can work together and be responsive and adjust and course correct. This is an extremely fluid situation, as you can imagine. The guidance we're getting from the state is changing every day. We're watching what's happening in other parts of the country and other parts of the world to try to figure out how this will actually even play out. The outdoor dining only aspect, probably from an economic point of view, doesn't make any sense in reality for these folks. But that coupled with takeout, we just think could be psychologically important and helpful. And so I think we'd like to just, work through it together and with great communication with Jeremy and Fred, navigate. So we're grateful. And I think, Steve asked if we could help with this Sugar Bowl as an example. We own the building next door where Kirby is, and Kirby is closing or closed. So I don't see any reason for which we can't let the Sugar Bowl set some tables up in front of Kirby and Company for the next few weeks to try to help them. Because to me, as a business person, the key thing is helping these guys stay open, keep the lights on, keep the kitchen staff paid, and keep the team intact. It's not about making money right now. We're just trying to get them through this so they stay open. A lot of restaurants aren't going to reopen after this COVID crisis. So that's all I really wanted to say, but mostly thanks for your responsiveness and your flexibility in this unprecedented time.
Thank you, David. Would any of your people like to add something? David Nelson's got a great restaurant. Mario does. Mario, I would be at your place tonight if it was open.
They're both muted. I don't know if they know that. David, you know you're muted? Oh, here you go.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. I'm David Nelson. I'm the 1020 Post owner. It's interesting times, and very happy to be alive. Where the town of Darien is incredibly supportive. I can get on my knees right now and say thank you so much to Darien, but like you guys all know because I see faces and see who's on this call and know people that you guys know, and all y'all are ordering takeout, and I appreciate it so much. So anything you guys can do to make it easy for us to have tables outside in unusual places over the next couple of weeks to make everybody feel comfortable. And obviously we're all operating under all the guidelines. I've had one case in my restaurant, somebody that hadn't even been in my restaurant. So I'm like, everybody's healthy, we're working hard. Can't say enough about David Genovese. Thank you, David. I'm here and looking at your cute face. And thank you.
Do you
It's
think
amazing. The core of the project, the whole town is amazing. Y'all know what's going on, so you don't need me to tell you what's happening. It's an amazing situation, and we're all happy to be a part of it.
Do you think a date like going through July 4th is good enough for you?
Well, I just, again, the flexibility is good, but like as soon as we can get back to everything normal would be the best thing. So I smiled when I heard July 4th because you guys seem so flexible about working with everything that you're dealing with. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so
much. David, is it fair to say though, like, let's say the initial messaging from the state is outdoor only with social distancing. Mm-hmm. If they gave you 25 to 50% occupancy inside, we could cut it back to the normal outside dining, perhaps. I mean, we're not asking for like.
I would so happily be able to put in 25 to 50% of the people inside the restaurant. I can't imagine that would make any difference, but it would make every difference to somebody like me to have even 10% or 20% people from a financial standpoint, and also from a standpoint of making people feel comfortable about going back to their lives like normal people.
Okay, we're trying to react to whatever the state comes up with. If once they say inside's open, have at it. It's got nothing to do with us.
Yeah, thanks. I'm right there with you guys.
All right.
I think, but this is why I think it makes sense for us as a commission, right? I mean, I know the governor hasn't fully published and made available his full reopen plan. There is on the record statements by him and by members of his reopen commission, so we know sort of the general timeline of what they're expecting and how the phases will work. We know there's going to be extensive, 4 to 10 weeks between each phase potentially. So I think we need to not be conservative in terms of timing, because I think Connecticut is likely to open slower than other states, even vis-a-vis the other 7, regional states that we're supposedly in line with. I think we're going to be slower than Rhode Island, slower than New Hampshire, slower than Massachusetts, perhaps quicker than New York. I think we need to, rather than keep coming back and redoing this, I mean, I think July 4th is great, but we already canceled July 4th, 4th of July, fireworks. So, I don't know.
The application, Kara, the application says it's for the liquor control board. The application, it's connected to the email that you got today. It's for the liquor. Okay, it's for the liquor control board. It says.
That's not an application, is it?
There's a link in there. There's a link.
Link?
Right, it's an application to the state for the liquor control board. It says the word temporary. So we'll see. We're not going to deal with that. That's what the restaurants do. But that's what's in there.
It's guided. It's not an application.
You'll see it. Check the link in the mail. Anything else, David?
I might be able to just share one interesting thing that Carol's comment brought to mind. I had a conversation yesterday with David Lehman, the head of economic development for the state, talking about this in-migration of potential residents from Manhattan and also corporate, but the potential for some pretty significant corporate relocations from New York City that we've been approached by. And we were talking about also, I couldn't help myself, I took the opportunity to talk about restaurant reopening and retail reopening and small business. And the one thing that you said as to your comment about timing, Kara, was that actually the state of Connecticut is likely to be very delicate around being perceived as being more aggressive than New York, being aggressive in pursuing companies from New York. But importantly, the conversation, he said, we are likely to follow the course, the pace of New York City and New York State, because we're worried, and I don't agree with this, but he said it, we're worried about if like New York stays shut down and Connecticut's more aggressive. We're worried about New York people coming over the border to come have dinner and socialize and then cause pressure. So, you know, there's a funny dynamic here.
I think Connecticut's going to be very conservative, and so that's why I think we need to be cognizant of that and be as supportive as we can. And I mean, I'm having July 4th, but I don't know.
I totally agree with you. Maybe we just so that we can be flexible and communicate.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry. I'm working till 2 a.m. every night. New Yorkers are already coming. Like whether we're aggressive or less aggressive or whatever, it's already happening.
We're talking about the governor and him reopening. We're saying because of the governor knows that, and so he's going to be conservative about reopening because he's concerned about a latent increase of statistics in Connecticut.
Well, I'm just saying that, like, in 4 weeks from now, and let's say we open on May 20th, and I think we should allow as much outdoor seating as possible. I am so pro all these businesses opening, getting as much revenue as possible. It's a disaster for any of us who are gig workers, and I feel very fortunate that real estate stayed essential. But in 4 weeks from then, if our cases remain steady, we're already in front of New York. Hopefully they will. Then we'll already know. We'll have data before New York.
Okay. Will not move. But anyway, that's neither here nor there because we're not.
May 20th.
Okay. It sounds like everybody's in agreement.
So maybe we should just be putting a date that's even further out.
That's fine. I mean, if you want to go Labor Day, we go Labor Day. It's.
And let me ask this too. So I'll tell you why I'm thinking. So I overheard someone at a restaurant, not in Darien, talking about they're just going to take the roof off their building. Right? So David, I know, fortunately, the configuration, I don't think in your properties allows that, but
Duchess is going to take off the top.
Fine, indoor. I know some of these, some of the walls wide open, right? All the windows open, and if there's no wall, is it indoor, right? Is there?
Sound like
that our purview to say, you get a couple tables that are just on the other side of the window. Can they be part of it as well too? Give them a little more space.
The reason why it comes up to us, it's a health department issue. They're the ones that approve it, but because of Darien's Planning and Zoning Commission, outdoor seating is by special permit. So that's why we have to take a look at it. That's why Jamie asked Jeremy and I to take a look at it. So that's where we come in. That's our our purview, our charge. So if someone makes their restaurant from an indoor restaurant to an outdoor restaurant, it's they got to come to us for building department stuff anyway. It sounds like everyone's is in agreement. If there's any other discussion or thoughts,
Probably the best way to do it would be maybe a motion which would allow temporary restaurant outdoor seating until a certain date. And if you guys wanted to set a maximum that I could administratively approve, 20, as Steve said, 10 tables, 20 tables, whatever it is, or a certain number of seating, that anything beyond that number we would bring back to the commission at a general meeting for you to see it, and with the understanding that everything that gets approved, a copy of that approval would get forwarded to the commission
Great.
for your information.
And the other thing I want to bring up is, I said earlier that the State Liquor Control Board is waiving all fees. Jeremy looks at this as not necessarily a new application, it would be an amendment to an existing application, so no fees would be incurred as per course. You said that right?
Right, no, there would be no application fee since it's just a temporary amendment is how we
Right.
could treat it.
And then I spoke to Selectman Stevenson, and she said by her power, whatever they have to do to waive fees, so no restaurateur or even retailer would have to address this, they would all be waived too. As you know, most of our application fees are either $250 or $400 for a special permit. So those fees will be waived. But anybody had any issues on that, that's fine. And we're good. Anybody have any closing thoughts before we kind of figure out some way to get a motion to approve this? And David, did Mario want to speak, or is he gone?
Hi, David, I'm here.
Mario Fontana.
Oh, hey, Mario.
But I'm afraid I just really came back to it, so I don't know what was discussed. So anything I say would be redundant probably.
Okay. Just want to know if you had anything to add around the rest. The idea is leaning in the direction of reporting this idea. We'll do an administrative application through potentially Labor Day, but subject to adjustment. And that was really it.
Okay, so that would be wonderful for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being around.
Okay.
Larry, you want to make some kind of motion?
I motion that we find a way to save dairy on restaurants.
I second the motion.
There we go. George Riley, any other comments?
No.
All those in favor?
Actually, what Larry said,
Yep.
or what Jeremy said.
What Jeremy said, what I said, what Larry said. It's not a written document, but it's a general meeting item. We want to move the ball forward. Okay.
Okay.
Does anybody want to go? Anybody would? My thought was July 4th weekend through July 6th. Does anyone want to go to Labor Day? Do you care?
Yes, I would think Labor Day. I would think Labor Day only because the town just canceled the 4th of July fireworks. So if the town's already considering that there's still going to be,
Okay.
Expensive
That's fine.
social distancing and kind of restrictions on activities and on, why are we going to be inconsistent with that?
Okay. Anybody have a problem with Labor Day?
No.
Okay. So it's Labor Day Tuesday.
Okay. Max number that I can approve? Okay.
That's fine.
With a certain percentage of the, like, it's hard to do a table number given the different sizes of restaurants.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine. I mean, just think about like Dutchess could open. Dutchess could use half their parking lot. Bartucci's could open. They could use half their parking.
Not number of tables.
I think the way I've heard it from other states is most restaurants would be 50% capacity.
Okay.
You know, I think
Or
it's.
not more than 50%, right? Because I think probably most of them 25 to 50 in that range. So let's.
I'd say if something comes in that's over the top and Jeremy
Over
flags
50%.
it, he'll let us know.
So let's do a ceiling.
And do 50% ceiling. Anybody good with that? Okay.
No, I don't, because if there's available space outside, I want restaurants to be able to use as much as possible, and if bodega, or not bodega, but like,
Then, if we're not going to approve it, we're saying then come to us.
I mean, that's direct.
I don't want these approvals. I think that it's gonna be fire marshal, there's other people that are gonna say yay or nay. I don't need to be doing that.
I mean, that's.
If a restaurant's gonna go under, we don't know. There's gonna be restaurants that aren't gonna survive this. Why would we not let someone else take some of their outdoor space?
I'm not saying we're not going to let them.
No, I just don't wanna be the person that they have to come to. If the fire marshal says okay and they negotiate it themselves, like Dave's Jeremy, I feel confident that everyone will handle it health-wise appropriately.
Great, like,
I'm not dealing with health issues.
Okay, so I mean, my example to you, Jen, is like Bartucci's. If they moved 100 tables to their side parking lot and they're all 6 feet apart, and the health department approved it, and they put a tent up or whatever they do, have at it. I don't want to stop them. Same with like Dutchess.
That's fine, I'm out, I'm fine.
Okay, so that means there is.
I don't envision myself saying no to anything that would come to us. I mean,
So no cap.
Well, it would be something, if I'm not comfortable, I'd bring it to the
Correct.
commission.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the standard we would use.
Okay.
So the sense I'm getting from Larry, Steve, Jennifer, and Kara is, if you're not comfortable, bring it to the commission.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor? Okay. Thank you, everybody. I think that's unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, great.
All right, back to our agenda.
Yep.
I did make a mistake. I apologize. Relative to the agenda, we're supposed to do the continuation of the public hearing with regarding 14 Raymond Street,
That's continued to May 19th.
May 19th. So it's read into the record. It's continued to May 19th, so we really didn't miss anything. Okay, we're good?
We're good.
Great, okay. Next up, deliberation only on the following application. Business site plan application number 90P, Darien Place LLC, 1077 Boston Post Road. This is the theater.
Oh, that's right, George.
Bye all.
Thank you, George. George Rai is recusing himself.
Thank you all. See ya.
All right, George. So this is the movie theater converting the rear portion of their building from an old movie theater seating that was closed now to some retail stores on the ground floor, and then converting this second floor of the movie theater, which included balcony seating and the screening room or the projection room, into 4 apartments. We had a long, lengthy discussion on this last time. I think, for the most part, you want to.
Well, I think what the commission's going to run through tonight is the application has to comply with section 1020, which are the site plan requirements. The commissions will have to make certain findings relative to sufficiency of parking and things like that. So I know that Kara was nice enough to get caught up with the meeting. Kara, do you want to start there in terms of watching the? Now I want to also. Let me interrupt you, Kara. The go-to version, the go-to meeting, when you hear at the start of this meeting, Fred pressing the button to record the meeting, we have posted the recordings on the town website. The recordings from the meetings that Fred is doing now is slightly different than Channel 79. The Channel 79 version, which people will be watching on TV, shows, for example, showing right now is me talking and Steve sitting next to me. The go-to meeting version shows all of you that you can see on the screen. So the go-to meeting, if a commission member were to watch, is a better meeting. It's easier to see who's talking. The PowerPoints are on the screen. So I know we've been able to post all of those for all of the meetings that we've had in April 14th, April 21, April 28th. And Kara, you mentioned to me today that you were able to watch the go-to meeting version of last week's meeting, the portion that you missed.
I was. So it was very easy. I was able to find it quickly and easily on the website. I clicked on the go-to meeting links. I was able to see all the dates. I clicked on the 428 link. I was able to, it was a long meeting, so I didn't watch all of it. I watched from where I started having technical difficulty and dropped off. And I was able to catch up, hear everything, see all the exhibits, hear all the speakers, know who all the speakers were. So I'm fully caught up, and obviously I had all the materials, so I am good to go. And it was, it was kind of nice to watch it in a different time.
There you go. All right, so before we go through point by point and stipulations, what I wanted to do is just get a sense of the meeting to see where people are on this thing on a global basis, and see if we're close. And then if we're on a global basis, somewhere looking towards approval, then we can dig deeper into the stipulations, so to speak, relative to it. Larry Warble, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, very detailed meeting last week, but I'd say my overall feelings is positive on moving forward on this application.
Okay.
You know, got a lot of details to go through, but it's,
Okay.
I want to support it. We want to have a good, vibrant downtown with lots of people going to it.
That's for sure.
That's something we know about.
Jim Rand, any initial thoughts?
No, I'm with Larry. I think it should go. I think we should approve it. I think it should go ahead. I have still some residual comments on the parking, but if it's not an issue to anybody else, it's not an issue to me. So I'll stop there.
Okay, that's great, thank you. George Riley's out. Kara Gailey, any initial thoughts before we get into details?
Initial thoughts are, like Jim and Larry, I'm very supportive of the project. I think it's a really beautiful plan. I think it's in line with the town plan of conservation and planning. I think it, accomplishes the goals of a more pedestrian, walkable downtown. It increases by, sort of a vibrant downtown, which is what I think we're all looking for, and addresses a housing issue in a transit-oriented sort of area. So I think all in, I'm very supportive of the plan, especially given that the theater, as much as I love the theater and I love the idea of a downtown theater, it was no longer a viable, operational theater. So as sad as that is, I'm very supportive of the current plan, and it's in line with our current, our plan of development. So I think, I'm supportive of it. In terms of the parking issues,
Well, let's go.
without getting into specifics,
Okay.
I think that's another issue where, and I think this was brought up a little bit at the tail end of the meeting, and it might have been David Genovese who brought it up, but I think it's in line with sort of my earlier comment, is that, I think in some issues we need to, put on our planning hat as opposed to our zoning hat and sort of look at things big picture and, not hone in on the parking, especially this is a very odd parking, situation, and not have that slow down a completely viable, in line with our long-term planning project on a very, oddball parking issue. And I'm not saying parking's not important, but I think parking should be an overall planning issue that we need to be proactive about and not ad hoc about. So that's sort of my thoughts overall on this, but overall, in a general sense, I'm very supportive of it, and I think it's a project that should be approved.
Great, thank you. Jennifer Leahy, last but not least, Elizabeth. Overall comments, thoughts, before we get to specifics.
Right, I mirror that. I think the plan Mr. Vaccaro brought forth is great. It's beautiful. It makes a lot of sense. And hear what everyone's saying about that. We have a planning problem though, because we didn't take a global view on parking in the last things that we've approved. So that's on us, and we are going to have to solve for that. And last week I was tired and couldn't really wrap my head around it. I knew we had a problem, but it was like everything was sort of convoluted. We have a problem. We have a problem here. It is obvious. And as someone who loves Cafe Nero, I love Cafe Nero. I have been known to maybe take one of Mr. Genovese's spots across the street when I shouldn't, because I'm like, there's no parking and I need to run in, and I'm on the move. And that's something that unfortunately in this application, I don't think it should come down on this application and not get approved. But at the same time, we have a problem, guys. We're over so many don't even exist. Even if we didn't have parking agreements with lots of other people, we can't make these spots up. And then we're going to have people who are just annoyed. And as someone who's in real estate and watching people flood from a Manhattan, the good news is it's gonna be vibrant. Our downtown's gonna be vibrant. What we're doing downtown is amazing. That's all awesome. We have a real issue though in our plan, and that's on us. And, we have to solve for that. And so that's where my conflict is. It's nothing to do with the application that was brought forth. I get it. I get that increase in itself is small. But when you have something like Cafe Nero, which really just knocked it out of the park, and we've got Tosh, it's very popular, we got to take that into account. We can't just ignore it and say, oh no, let's do this tiny view again and hope it all works itself out. Because on Fridays, when we have 256 spots that are going to be necessary, we can't change that. And that is two parking experts told us that they don't feel comfortable. I mean, they kept saying it, and it kept going back to, well, it's only an increase of 4 or whatever, and the use is not going to be, there's not a higher intensity of use, given the movie theater is really at night and the rest of the stuff is during the day. So it's all sort of convoluted again. We have to address that. So I don't know how we address that, Steve, but we have to address it. Like, this is our job.
No, I get it. You don't get an argument from me. Relative to addressing that, the thing that I've been trying to push for a few years now is the Leroy West parking site, which is directly behind, it's kind of sort of directly behind the sports shop across the street. Leroy West is a great site that the town owns, and it's next to the train station. Yep. If you could deck that lot easily and double it in size, you can double it in size. That's a little bit like. So that's one of them, and the other one globally is there is a site that the town owns, and I think the state owns. It's on the corner of Old Kings Highway and Tokenique Road. It's right next to that church. That's another site that the town owns. So we have one on one side of the road, one on the other side of the road. So you don't get an argument from me on a global basis, and we do have to address it, and hopefully we can address it, when the dust settles, and because it's money that the town's gonna end up spending, it gets into politics, and that's.
But I think we should address, parking, affordable housing, and encouraging economic development at the same time, because I think right now, our moratorium is gonna expire in October.
Let's focus on this for now.
Oriented development, and there's gonna be an increased need to support local businesses and economic development in our area, to support our tax base and our mill rate. So I think to discuss one and not discuss all of them is not maybe, I think it's more of that disjointed approach. So I think we need to consider how best to address these from a planning perspective, but address all of these needs, which unfortunately, they're going to collide.
Right. Okay. So let's.
But it almost presses the issue that it needs to be addressed proactively. Then that's my view.
Okay. So let's stay on task.
Like Jennifer said, and everyone said, it shouldn't fall on this one, application and this one development.
Okay. So that's the general sense of the meeting. I'm agreeing. I think it'll be a great application. It'll be a great addition to town. We just got to make sure we put in stipulations, bells and whistles to make sure it all fits the way we want it. The first item to me is the architecture. I don't think anybody had any problem with the architecture. That was fine. There was no flood mitigation. What else do you want to?
The ARB gave a positive report.
ARB gave a positive report. That's already done. There's 3 apartments. There's no size. 4 apartments. There's no affordable housing issue there.
Right.
What are the findings that we have to come up with, and what are the questions that you have?
Right. Section 1020 talks about for a site plan what information that needs to be included, and where we talk about section 904 is shared parking. In the past, the commission has, you may have seen it, I think maybe it was a prior approval about parking. In fact, Mr. Vaccaro during hearing talked about the fact that for a while he had a parking monitor on site to help get commuters out of the lot, so when the businesses open up first thing, there's not already people there. We can talk about signage in the lot. Ms. Zabatakis, when she presented the application, talked about the possibility of an agreement with 35 Leroy. There is no current agreement, but they were in the process of pursuing one with Dr. Adley. So those are some of the issues that the commission can talk about tonight in terms of possible conditions or of the approval.
Okay, so in terms of stipulations, the stipulation, they offered and we should accept that they're gonna put in place an agreement with, 35 Leroy, that they have additional parking. That's gonna have a release valve for the parking. The one thing I wanna make sure that we caution ourselves on is the Darren Sport Shop has got a similar agreement. We've never seen Darren Sport Shops, but we should be able to see, this one that's done by them.
Submitted as part of the record.
Submitted as part of the
Yeah,
record.
right?
Okay. So that's to me is a pretty straightforward one. With regards to reserve parking, no reserve parking?
Right, if you read section 904 of the regulations, it's not 904, I'm sorry, 905, it talks about joint parking, which talks about shared parking. It says specifically in section 905, no parking spaces shall be reserved for any specific building tenant. And the whole point of shared parking lots is that theoretically anybody could use any space in the shared lot, or what they call in section 905, the joint parking lot. So that would have to be part of the condition, that the regulations would not allow spaces to be reserved for any specific tenant.
So where that swings back to is, I want to just bring up your name, Jennifer. So if you're renting an apartment, when most people that rent apartments, I've got spot number 32. That's my spot. So those 4 apartments are there. They're not allowed to have quote unquote reserved spaces.
Well, let me
Hold on,
rephrase that. Hold
Go
on. There was in section 905.2, I may have misspoken. Section 905.2 was a provision put in the regulations a few years ago, which says in mixed-use developments, so this would be a mixed-use development, the commission may approve the reservation of on-site parking areas for residential tenants, provided that the commission shall find that the remaining on-site parking shall be sufficient to meet the parking demand of the related residential parking uses, i.e. gas delivery service providers, and non-residential uses covered by the joint parking agreement. So you would have to make that specific finding that, we can reserve 2 spaces, 4 spaces for the residential tenants, because there's enough there for everyone else to share.
Well, before I open up Pandora's box, I don't recall if the applicant said that they wanted to reserve parking spaces for those 4 apartments.
That was going to be my question, Steve. I don't recall them asking
Okay.
to reserve spaces.
There's 5 spaces total?
There's 4 apartments.
Okay, but how many spaces did they have to have for the apartments, quote unquote?
It's like 1.5 per apartment, so that's,
No,
Right? Or you could do 1 per unit if you wanted to.
yeah.
but it's not in real life. So, I know everyone's talking about that's not in real life. Anyone coming from New York, just so we're all on the same page, we all have to stop, we all have to pivot, because 689 square feet is a big apartment.
Right, I know.
That's a big.
That would-
So they can stay.
My only question on that, Jen, is if someone lived in Manhattan for, 15 years like I did, and then I moved up here as a couple with 1 kid, we only had 1 car in the city. You think both couples are going to buy 2 cars?
I think that things are all changing, and
Okay, that's fine.
I'm not gonna speak for what, it's a whole new world, and people are dying to get out, so if they can afford to live in this beautiful, wouldn't you wanna live in it? A beautiful new apartment for probably a fraction of what, any rental is in New York City in a nice building of the same quality?
Right. I don't want to. Yeah. I opened up an issue that they may not have asked for, because I don't know if they ever said they wanted to reserve X number of spaces for their residential apartments. So if it's allowable, they can do it. They can do it.
But if you think, can he we do it after, like, we have to approve it, right?
Well, he could always come back for the request.
As the regs read, can they reserve it without asking permission for it, which I think they can.
Right, and I think that's something the commission could,
They don't have to ask our permission for it.
right, the commission could
The regs didn't do it.
either approve it or say, come back to us,
Right.
or not approve it, certainly. The question is,
I think as the regs read, I don't believe they have to ask our permission. I think if we say there's adequate parking in the mixed use, which I think where the debate is, if there's a determination that there's adequate use, they can reserve a spot, spot for the residential.
and that'll be a question for the commission, are you willing to make that finding?
You have to answer the predicate question, which is what we decide on.
Personally, for approving this application, we should approve him to put stop the sign. He'll get more money.
That's not how the regs read. That's not how the regs read.
What?
Okay.
That's not how the regs read.
Right, so if we approve it, right, even, so he can do it anyway, but if we say, yes, we approve it, we can also do that, right? So we have already had some control over it. You don't think so, Kara? If we say, yes, you can do this, assign the spots, we get that there's a parking issue.
No, if there's a parking issue, you can't reserve the spots. That's
Can
the
we
whole.
do both? Even if there's a parking
Again,
Right, so we'll say no
that's
reserved spaces.
0.5
If he wants them, he can
again.
come back.
Right, it's provided the commission shall find that the remaining on-site parking shall be sufficient to meet the parking demand of the related residential parking uses and non-residential uses covered by the agreement.
The answer to that question is no.
And they can reserve. So the predicate question that we have to find is that there's adequate parking for the other mixed usage.
Right, so,
If we find that, they can reserve these spots for the residential units.
all right, so my proposal is no reserved spaces.
Oh, but you don't have spots.
So to say that, you have to find that there's not adequate parking.
Which is, it's not more than adequate, we know that.
There's not.
It's not more than adequate.
Hang on a second.
They've already.
Okay, Jim?
Let me say something. It's a shared parking
Correct.
for the three entities that are involved in this.
Right.
That means that each of the entities are telling us combined that there's enough space there for their employees and their customers.
No, that's not what the regs say.
Excuse me, Kara, just let me finish. To the extent that there is anybody parking there that is not a customer of any of the three entities, or is not an employee of the three entities, then they get removed from the count. That's not the purpose of the shared parking. The shared parking is not, they didn't enter into this agreement so that people across the post road and all those little stores could park there. But that's what happens.
Right.
It's actually opposite.
So what do you want to do?
Well, we can come back to that,
Yeah, I feel.
either in another meeting.
On global view.
We'll
It's
come
an
back to that.
estimate. You can't take my parts, because they're not part of this.
All right, let's move on to another topic. What's another way of
I guess the question is, at the start of when everything opens, would the commission want the owner to have a parking monitor for certain times or days to, especially relative to commuters in the morning? Is there any desire by the commission to have the owner continue to monitor in the mornings to make sure that commuters and people who shouldn't be there don't get settled in? Is that something the commission wants to regulate, condition, or not get involved with?
Have we put that in place for any other development in the shared parking lot arena?
I'm gonna answer that question in a second, I think. I'm gonna try to. But for example, 1020 Post Road has a parking monitor in the back. That's really not a shared parking agreement because I think the one guy owns everything. The other one that does have a monitor is Dan Delcetti. He monitors his own parking lot, which is subject to a three-party shared agreement.
We ask him.
Hold on, Jen, or Karen. But I don't know. I don't know if that. I don't think that is in the reg or in the resolution for his.
No, I think the one that I'm thinking of, there might have been one for might have been the theater a few years ago. I'll have to double check to see if the commission has ever done that. I think there might have been, but I'll double check.
The only thing I know that we did do when Burger Shakes, not Burger Shakes and Fries, when Shake Shack opened, we required them to have a cop out front for like 2 weeks or a week and a half. At the beginning, that really wasn't parking, that was really for safety.
Why are we going to make this applicant do something that we haven't made we didn't make Cafe Nero do?
That's the question.
We didn't make other people in the shared parking lot do, so why are we going to make them do it?
That's what we're asking. That's the question he's asking. Do we want to do it or not?
But it's also being brought up because he's on there, because he has the parking problem.
Right.
And that's why he's there. Like, let's all be clear, the reason why there's a parking attendant in any parking lot is because there's a problem.
Right, so he
And
can.
so the question makes sense.
We're not saying that or he can't do it. We're just not requiring that he
I don't
must do it as a precondition to approve.
Larry, what do you think?
I'm not trying to do it, but I'm pointing out the opposite.
Larry, you have any thoughts?
There's a difference between requiring someone to do it as a condition of approval versus he has the freedom to do it if you want, right? A business owner can do that if they want to preserve their parking for their own business so that their customers have places to park.
Right, so from my perspective, I don't see any reason to require him to have a.
Okay. Jim, any thoughts on that? No requirement? Jim? No requirement, okay. Jennifer, Carrie, you sound like no requirement. Jennifer is yes. 50-50. What else, Jeremy?
That's all I can think of now. I think what Fred and I can do is take what you guys have discussed tonight, start in on working a draft resolution. It won't be for next week. It might not even be for the week after as we transition to dealing with Oxford School. But we'll start in on it and we'll come back to the commission at a future night, either with a draft resolution or with further questions on how you want to address certain issues.
Okay, so that's it. We're going to authorize Jeremy to write up an approval of this with the stipulation that he sees fit. And when we get the draft, we can review it once, twice, until we get it correct. Right?
Wait,
Correct.
sorry, I'm just, my brain hurts. So I get it, I get why we're trying to improve it, I get it, and I'm all for it. I love talking about things that could happen in the future, I do, I really enjoy that as well. The problem is, we have a present day parking problem. So, as a commission, I would just like to say this again, I have a problem with us saying, this is great, when we already know from two experts that has difference in our zoning, right? Zoning's okay, the plan's okay. We have a parking problem, and we're saying we're cool. We know there's going to be 256 spots on, I think it was on lunch on Friday. There could be a problem, and we're not taking account for an increase in population and maybe some changeover in that might happen because of post-COVID. So we're just, what are we? So talking to the town, like, how do we further that discussion? Because I do want something to be on record that we're, you know what I mean? Like, this is.
No, I get it. We're going to draft up an agreement that, or an approval for the thing. If you want to vote against it, you're welcome to vote against it. But what we're trying to do is put in the stipulations in there that try to address the problem that we can relative to this application. We have to put it, whatever we can put in there to address the parking problem. You know, and that's what we have to work out. That's the stipulation that we have to figure out.
It's a stipulation specific to this application, even though this application is not causing the parking issue.
We can only do a stipulation to this application, yes.
Oh, we can change the regs. There's a number of things we can do, and we don't know if the applicant actually wants reserved parking. Right? We can approve it. They may not want reserved parking. If they want reserved parking as a mixed-use building, then we need to address that there's adequate parking for the other uses in the shared parking lot per the regs. You can amend regs. You can keep regs as they are, not seek reserved parking, and then we can address, but I think as a board, as a commission, we need to proactively address all of these various issues that keep coming up and not do them, which has been a theme now the last couple of meetings, is not continue to address things in a reactive ad hoc way, but address things in a global eagle's eye kind of sense with a long-term planning view. And I see those as economic development, affordable housing, moratorium on affordable housing being, expiring, and parking, and there may be other issues, but those are the ones that immediately, smack me in the face, and it seemed to be catching us up, and, we're getting mired in them in almost every meeting now.
That's what we did, town plan and conservation of development for care. It took us 2 years to do that. It took us 2 years to do it.
It's a document.
It took us 2 years to do it.
And zoning commission, we're not just a zoning commission. We're not just a, stamp it.
So
I think we're gonna start in, this is not an easy one, so we'll start in.
Go black and white sort of thing. If we, Steve, you're having an issue, right? Wouldn't you get the shareholders in the room and have a go meeting with Genevieve's and all the people who are affected by this, and just have a brain share? I mean, I'm not saying this has to be our issue, right? I get that we are going to prove this. We have to do this for the town. It's not, it's not about Mr. Vaccaro's application. We have to do it for the town. So getting him in a room, getting Adley on a Zoom or a go meeting, whatever, getting everyone together so that we can come up with a plan. That's all I'm saying. It has nothing. Yeah, I get it, right? We all are on the same page, but we have to do this. So can we organize that? Like,
we can.
organize it on the back end? That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to make it complicated. In fact, I want it to be like logical. Let's just use logic and not make it some big thing. Just get the shareholders on. You handle it. I trust you. You can handle it. Can we do that?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
get Jamie, room. Like, let's
Right.
all talk about it. Dave, you up for it? Genevieve, shake your head yes. If you're up for having a meeting, like everyone get together.
He can't speak. It's not a public hearing. But yes.
I get it. Because
I got it. No, you're right. It's it's an item. The whole global thing is an item that we as a planning and zoning commission should keep on our radar screen and tackle it as soon as we can, as best we can. If it gets into us recommending to the town that they've got to build a 250 space parking garage, we're going to find a spot for it, and someone's going to pay for it. That's where it comes down to. That's the whole shooting match. But okay,
Great, we'll get started. It's gonna take a while, but we'll get started.
we'll get started. Next, everyone's good with that. He's going to start his draft, and we're going to move on. Okay. Next item is director's report. Jeremy, go ahead, sir.
Just wanted to give everyone a heads up that our next meeting is next week. I think the sole item on the agenda will probably just be Oxford School. We've set aside next week, the week after, which is May 19th, if we need it. We'll take it from there, and I'll get your packets out to you Thursday or Friday this week. But as always, we're making a more conscious effort to get everything onto the town website. So if you wanted to start in on your review, the town website has, for I think all the pending applications, Fred has been working with us on getting everything scanned in. So if you wanted to jump ahead, you can just jump onto the town website and start taking a look at the upcoming applications. That's all I have.
The only thing I would say about that, they're doing a great job putting up all the stuff on the website. It's in no real order. I think it's in order of the stuff that was received, and maybe you want to answer that, Fred. I think is that right?
That's correct. The information has been posted to the web in the order in which it's been received by our department.
Okay, so like for argument's sake, if you go to, there's a drainage peer review report from Redness and Mead on the Oxford School. It's all the way down at the bottom, you know,
Yes.
and then the drainage report by whoever the consultant is up at the top.
We put everything in chronological order. So the first thing received is at the top. The newest material is at the bottom. And in fact, Fred, one item came in today on Oxridge. Remind me and we'll post it tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah, great.
great. I looked at it a little bit and I've gone through, but you guys do have a lot of stuff on that website. Okay, next item is chairman's report. That's me. Three things just to talk about. One, I think I'm happy to report and see that the Corbin District started their demolition. I think it started this week where they started demoing those buildings in the back, so they're going forward with all their demo of the buildings in the back. It's great to see that, and thanks to Bay Water Province for pushing forward. With regards to the Norotan Heights, the commons at Norotan Heights, about a third of the stormwater vaults are in on that project. Those holes are 12 feet deep. Those vaults they can put in there, it's kind of wild. I figured this out. They can hold 1 million gallons of water. The things, the Coltex, or not the Coltex, this stormwater vaults in the ground, that's the size of 1.5 Olympic swimming pools that are 6 feet deep. So there's a lot of stuff they're doing there. A couple weeks ago, Jeremy did administrative approval over at the high school. A portion of the track that we approved a couple of years ago was supposed to stay as grass. They wanted it to be crushed stone. They didn't do the crushed stone last year when they put it in, but that was administratively approved to finish the crushed stone all around the track the way they wanted. The cross-country track, yep, on that one. Jeremy also did, in consultation with me, an administrative approval of a temporary signage package that was put forth by some high school parents association. That's a fundraising group over at the high school. So you might see temporary signs around town in various spots that were approved by our town too.
Can you just go over that again? I don't understand that.
There's temporary signs that were put forth by a fundraising group at the high school that you're going to see around town probably 2 weeks from now.
I'm sure it's going to be soon. I think what they wanted to do, Kara, this is a way to honor the seniors.
Surprise.
And the details are uncertain, but we did approve some signage. We're not sure where, but they're making the final decision.
Yeah, it falls under our purview because it's signage, and we have to do some approvals. And what else? The last thing is, I came up with a little virtual meeting protocol for order of speakers. We did it a little bit tonight relative to Wilder, where we had Wilder introduce, then the speaker, the expert talk, then Q&A from us. I think it worked a little bit better. We'll try to refine that a little bit. And add another thing that one of the commissioners requests or suggestions or ideas, and that would be namely Kara Gately. We're going to ask all the experts and people that present in their exhibits to mark them as exhibit 1, 2, 3, or if it's like Redness and Mead's got 3 pages, they can put their name on it and then say what the number is, and they refer back to it. We know exactly what you're talking about and what the page is, instead of saying LO23 on the blah, 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 whatever it is. And I think that's going to make these meetings go a little bit smoother. I think tonight's with Wilder went pretty good. But this is going to be going on, the way we're doing it now, for another, at least a month.
I would presume at least.
Yeah, at least a month. So if we can fine tune it and get it better, that's great. If anybody has other suggestions, either call me or call Jeremy or
I
call
would
Fred.
just say, Jeremy, emphasize to all these presenters that PowerPoint is their friend.
Yes, that's a good point,
For
Larry.
us to have it on the screen so we can follow versus find it in my pile.
Right.
Put it on the screen.
Yeah, it also helps the viewers at home and anyone who's logging into the meeting that might not have the materials in front of them. So that's a good point. I think another
If
point.
they can use pointers on the screen, all this, we had a little bit of it today, looking at trees and things like that.
Right.
That's going to be the best way to, and frankly, even when we're back live, if we had monitors that they could use, because when someone puts something on that easel on the other side of the room, I can't see it.
That was one of my things originally, Larry, is I wanted to put like a 54-inch flat screen inside the, I call it the first selectmen's room, and stick it on the wall. Any business presentation you go to, They'll give you a PowerPoint deck, and they put it up on the screen on the flat screen. You know, the town's thinking about it. Who's Kate Bush?
Yeah,
Town-
this is really gonna,
We go for a discontinued, like, school smart board, they were like getting rid of those things. and getting
Yeah.
rid of them.
That's
Can we like, off my hand
Well,
again?
those were new when my kids were in the school.
I think it's the first selectman's gonna.
Like, they're like, got brand new ones now, like, we don't need this anymore.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal.
it,
You know?
it-
They have one of their,
the applicants have also been helpful in getting us PDF versions that we can post to the website. So what this really is going to do is really transition the department to more electronic submittals and PowerPoints. So really that this was the impetus for people going into the 21st century. So we've been working, Fred especially, with many of the applicants to guide them along. Even if they're short PowerPoints, Larry, we find it helps them think about their presentation a little better.
Do
So-
you want to talk about Oxbridge? 33 pages.
Yeah, we're gonna have to work with applicants to shorten them as well. That, you know, these PowerPoints don't need to be 30 slides. We've seen the past couple weeks, 5 to 10 slides is usually enough to make any presentation.
Yeah.
can Luke Shaw, like, lead that? Like, he's like the technology wizard, he's the principal at Oxbridge, former head of technology for the district. Can't he, like,
Well,
spearhead?
yeah, I don't know how that goes in commercial. But one thing to add what you said, Larry, is I think, and Fred, you can chime in and we'll wrap this thing up. Is tonight you posted all of the exhibits, right? Versus sharing your screen and to have the other person post the exhibits.
Well, because Wilder was in the room with you presenting tonight, he obviously didn't have the ability to show everyone what he was presenting on screen.
Right.
So I took the exhibits that he submitted to our office on Thursday or Friday of last week and shared my screen, and so everyone could see the exhibits.
I think it worked great. The only thing is some presenters that may be a little bit better, like that Doug guy who was the lighting guy. Maybe on a future application, he shares his screen and he uses the pointer that Larry was talking about. I don't know, but that's something you got to work out in advance. I think the way you did it tonight, when you had them all and you did the whole thing, was great, and I appreciate that. That's it for me.
Okay, great. So it's just the minutes and then.
Just the
we're good.
minutes. Then we have a set of minutes from April 28th. It looks like it's a bunch of resolutions and a couple stuff at the end. Let's just go around the horn. Jennifer Leahy, any questions, comments, additions, edits, typos?
I don't think so, no.
Larry Warble? Question? Jim Rand?
None from me.
George Riley's not here. It's Carrie Gately.
No. I'm just double checking, no.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve as submitted from Larry Warble.
Please approve the minutes as submitted.
Jennifer, you seconding? All those in favor? Aye.
5-0. Thank you.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. I think Jen got the first and Larry got the second. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. Signing off.